Now let's talk in more specific terms about these requirement specification documents and the subsequent protocols that will be used to demonstrate that each requirement has been met satisfactorily. The V model is often used to explain validation and how requirements documents match up against their corresponding protocol. At the bottom of the V, after developing your validation plan, you'll have a configuration requirements specification. Think of this as the foundation level of your system. What hardware and software are needed to support the new application? Has the supplier been qualified, and do they have the appropriate controls in place? Do you have procedures in place to support the system? If you're validating the QPulse application, you'll want to take the hardware and software requirements provided by Gale and include them in your configuration requirements specification. The installation qualification protocol, also referred to as the IQ, will be the corresponding protocol to demonstrate that you have met each requirement specified in the CRS or configuration requirements specification. For example, if the application will reside on your server, you'll need to document that the server meets the minimum requirements to successfully support QPulse. You'll also be documenting that you have appropriate procedures in place. For example, you'll want to ensure that access to the server is limited to only those with the appropriate and documented training. Don't forget to include your IT people in the validation training. QPulse comes with a web portal. If the use of the web portal is a requirement, you'll need to document that it's accessible. Since QPulse will be utilizing your email to send messages, including reminders and escalations, you'll want to document that QPulse is able to send out those reminders and escalations. You probably wouldn't be watching this video unless you had already purchased the Part 11 add-on, or at least planning to purchase it. You may want to include these requirements here and document they are being met in the IQ. You want to ensure the audit log viewer has been installed and is capturing the appropriate information. There's no right or wrong place to include these requirements, so don't get caught up in trying to figure out where to put them. You may decide to include these requirements in your user requirements specification, indicating, for example, where electronic signatures will be used, or specifying how many incorrect attempts a user can make before being locked out of QPulse. Let's assume you've documented the configuration specification requirements, had that document reviewed and approved, and that you've developed and executed your IQ or installation qualification protocol. You documented that each requirement was met, or you documented the deviation encountered. Deviations were addressed, and the execute protocol was reviewed and approved, indicating you may move on to the next step. Now it's time to move up the V model and develop a functional requirements specification, or FRS. Luckily, most regulators have adopted a risk-based approach to validation and assume that you have done your due diligence in finding a supplier that has done a thorough job of testing the basic functionality of the application they're providing. This means that you can leverage the supplier's documentation because the developer has already done extensive testing. If you have purchased a validation pack along with the purchase of QPulse, you'll not only have a great start on the documentation already mentioned, you'll also have access to all of Gale's requirements and executed test cases. Gale also provides a document within that pack that explains their approach to software development and their continuous improvement of the product. Additionally, a table is provided that explains the technical controls that are in place to meet the Part 11 requirements. Since we have already established that you can leverage this documentation, this part will be simple. You may choose to just develop a combination functional/user requirements specification document. Include your specific requirements for the use of QPulse, as well as requirements that may be related more towards basic functionality that you identified as high-risk areas within your risk assessment. Chances are that many of your more specific requirements were identified during the configuration of QPulse. When ECL2 provides configuration services, we document each decision as it's made, so that these decisions can then be turned into the specific user requirements you'll be testing. For example, you may want a message to be sent to your document control group anytime a new draft document has been created in the system. That will be documented on the configuration map and turned into a user requirement. All of these requirements will be collected and become your user requirements specification. Again, this can be combined with your FRS. The corresponding combined protocol to ensure each of the requirements indicated in your FRS/URS are met will be the operational/performance qualification, or OQPQ protocol. Just as in the IQ, you will execute the document to provide evidence that each requirement has been met satisfactorily, or document the deviation. Once all the deviations have been addressed or accepted as is, the final report can be written and the system released for use.